Hi, Remy.
Hey,
How are you doing?
good, thanks. Looks like it's
The
the two.
contrast,
Huh?
the contrast between your green wall and your pink shirt is fantastic, by the way. It's really nice, you know.
Thanks. I like color.
I see. How are you doing?
Doing good. Um, just got back from a couple weeks in India, actually.
In India? Were you on
Yeah.
holiday or business?
It was this time was a holiday. I used to work with teams over there quite a bit. And there's a colleague who I've worked with for a long time who his daughter got married. So I went to that wedding. Uh, which was fun. It was modest, I think, but India standards, but interesting.
It was
Uh,
modest for Indian standards. I don't know why, but I have somehow it could be, that's just now a trick on my mind because there was this huge wedding from an Indian man. But I could swear that a friend of mine, which is Indian, also had like a huge celebration when they got married, but I'm not sure.
yeah, I mean, it's not it like this was a 3 day exercise,
Right. Okay,
but
there we
they're,
go.
they're often like 5 days or a week. So that's what I mean by modest. It was only 3 days.
In,
Um,
in yeah, okay.
and it's not atypical to have like at the reception part, like 1,000 and sometimes even like 5,000 people show up in some of the villages, just the whole village goes.
Wow.
Um, so, I mean, for these folks, it was a few hundred. So that I think was pretty small as well. But I got a taste, so that was nice.
Got
Uh,
a few good cars. You know. How long have you been there? A week, or did you stay a bit longer?
yeah,
Yeah.
I was there for about 10 days since we were over there. And my wife hasn't ever been, and so we did some sightseeing as well. Went to the Taj Mahal, of course, which is just, an amazing building, and went to a few other places.
Nice, nice. Okay, so then let's kick this off. Today it's just the two of us, I believe. I anyway have to go formally through the agenda here. By being here, we both agree to the membership agreement, participation, contribution, and guidelines, and the code of conduct. Um, Now, what you have to know is that this meeting is published to YouTube and it will may use LLM and AI summary tools. And that's just an information that we have to give to people. If it's okay with you, you can either turn off your camera or you just don't speak, then you will not be AI summarized. Okay, introduction of the attendees. Hi, I'm Pascal from Chili Cream.
Remy from Airbnb.
Nice. This one we will skip. Then the review of the agenda. We only have one task today. I've heard you have an agenda item, so we can maybe put this first and get over it, and then we can have a look at we can have a quick discussion about the road to V1.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't have an agenda item. One thing to be aware of is there's somebody who specializes in metrics for Viaduct,
mhm,
and she's on vacation this week.
mhm.
So I'm kind of filling in for her and will pass information on if need be. But I think in terms of regular contributions to OTel metrics, she's really into tracing, by the way. Um, Vicky is her name. She'll start to come next month.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I've reached out to, I know it was a bit short notice, but I saw, I think her talk proposal when I was reading the talks for Graphical Comp, and I saw that she's doing auto stuff. And then I reached out to James? No.
James, yeah.
What is his name? James?
Yeah, James
Um,
Bellinger.
well, there's a James everywhere, right? I mean,
There's a guy. There's a guy.
let's
His name is
say.
John. There's a guy, John Lucas, who.
Yes, exactly. The one from Brazil, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
He's kind of keeping tabs on all
Yes.
things GraphQL Foundation for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the same chat as he is, so I broadcasted, hey, I need to talk to someone from Airbnb because I see you do great stuff. So now, thanks for being here. You can also relay the my email address to her. Essentially, it's just pascal@chilicream.com. Very simple. Um, so first name chilicream.com, and then we can also have asynchronous discussion outside of a meeting because these OTel working groups, they are once a month. And since last year, we stopped quite early because November was Thanksgiving. December was Christmas. January, people were still on holiday. In February, we had to move because of other reasons. And now, sorry, January had to move because of other reasons. And then these things drag along. Usually we are three, four people. Now it's just two of us. So I'm always happy to have new inputs here. But
Okay.
fantastic. Looking very much forward to it. Okay, so maybe quick update what has happened. We were mainly working in pull requests over the last couple of weeks. I've merged them all in. All of the pull requests are now here in the spec folder. I will add a few more before I will make a pull request to the OpenTelemetry semantic conventions repository. Essentially, what we have started with, just so that you're also in the pictures, is the spans that we want to define with the attributes which are graphical specific. And we took this from the point of view that tracing is most likely going to be the most important thing that we have. Then next is most likely going to be metrics as the second most important things, and we probably will only rarely have logs. Now, we already have defined logs though, because there was a guy from the OTel Foundation, which was part, or from the OTel Semantic Conventions team, which was part of the meeting as well. And he mentioned that actually you could also send the errors that we have over the log signal. That's the reason why we have also specified this. So that's the specification how it is now. I did a quick cleanup today of all the pull requests, merged them in, and I also reduced the complexity of the naming a bit because we had the thing that we had very long, sorry, not here in the spans. We had very long names of these IDs, and now they're actually quite nice. They're quite short. It's just span graphical, and they follow the semantic conventions specification pattern. Exactly. So that's one thing. Now, the next thing that is open is the pull request because I discovered this today, where I propose another attribute that we add because at the moment, the problem that we have in the specification is that the graphical validation, graphical parsing, variable curve. So maybe let me show you. It's probably the easiest. We have a couple of spans here. This one is called the graphical server span. Essentially, is the whole graphical server request, right? Most likely, this is going to be before this, you're most likely going to have a HTTP span. So you have the HTTP span, which is a slash graphical request. And then you have this graphical server span, which essentially encapsulates the whole execution, not only the execution, but the whole graphical processing of this request. So as
Mm,
soon as it goes into the pipeline until everything is seeded into the HTTP response stream. This encapsulates this all. So that's usually the one where we have to talk about how we want to name this, right? So we have, for example, query, or if we don't know it, we just say graphical operation. We may have things like query and then the query name, or mutation and then the mutation name. That's still a bit dependent on how big your cardinality is or how high your cardinality is, because span names are a bit sensitive to cardinality explosions.
mm,
Inside of this span, essentially everything else follows. So we have the graphical document parsing span, where we parse the graphical document. We have the validation span, where we validate the document. We have the variable coercion span, where we coerce the variables. And then we have something which is completely optional, is the graphical operation planning span. This
mm.
essentially is when you plan the operation. We do have this in hot chocolate. I don't know about you in Viaduct in Java, I believe in JavaScript it just executes. It just goes directly to execution. But
No, we do have a planning. We do have planning.
yeah,
The plans get cached, so it's often pretty empty,
yeah,
but
same thing. I
we
mean
have
here, like we also only in our chocolate we only parse. We only no we parse. No, we only parse once because we get no through the parsing we get the hash, so we have to parse, but we only validate once, and
mm,
we course obviously every time because that's required.
mm,
But yeah, we also have this planning part, and then there's something which is for mainly for distributed graphical. Maybe it's something that you have too. It's essentially when you have steps that you can execute. So the plan
mm,
leads to steps. For example,
mm,
in the federated system, this is when you then execute these sub blocks. Most likely, I don't think that you have this, or maybe you do. Interestingly enough, there's also servers which have this. For example, GraphFast, where it is somewhere. GraphFast does this as well because it doesn't have the normal, quote unquote, normal execution model of GraphQL, and then it executes these steps. Then the next thing is the operation execution one. And this now that we have parsed, validated, cursed, and everything, we can do the whole execution. This is the second long span that you have in tracing, where you then actually have all of the graphical execution with all resolvers in it.
mm,
And inside of this, we have the graphical field execution. And this
mm,
is when you execute a coordinate. This one is a bit special because we have a lot of, like, we wrote a few things how you could optimize this because what you should never ever do is trace all of the fields. That's like not a good idea. Because if you
mm,
trace all of the fields, then you have more telemetry than you actually return to the user. So that's not what we want.
mm,
What we do in our chocolate, for example, is we say we only trace async resolvers, and I think you can probably do a similar thing, right? That
mm.
you do not define a resolver for each field, right?
Right.
So that's also the ones that we infer, it's just a property which is resolved in nanoseconds. We essentially never trace. We only trace the ones which are rich
Mm.
in
So one of the
uh,
things,
uh,
so one of the things that we have is, our resolvers can express fragments which define the content that they need.
mhm.
Those fragments essentially create a dependency graph between
Mhm.
resolve, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and in fact, therefore, we don't really have span trees. We have like a more complicated graph, and we use links to attempt to kind of connect these dependencies. Does that
Mhm.
has that come up at all in the discussion of the field level spans?
It doesn't really matter that much because the parent of a field span is always the operation span. So, like the parent of this span is not the field span above this. The parent of this span is the graphical operation execution span. So it doesn't matter how you actually resolve this. It's just,
But
you know,
it's almost like a child. It creates a closer to what would be a child. Like if my resolver needs data that your resolver is generating, then you're kind of a child of me, right? Because I'm sitting there waiting for you.
yes.
Um,
What you could do is you could build internally because there's a similar dependency when you think about federation, where you have a query which is executed on one graph, which returns, for example, you get the I don't know, the username from the user from one graph and the address from the other graph. So when you now fetch the user, you get back a user by ID, and now you have to, for example, pass the user ID into the address service so that you can fetch address by user ID and actually get the address back for the user. To do
mhm,
these things, you first need to go to the user service and then you need to extract the user ID and you have to pass it to the address service. It's pretty much what you described, right? You have to first execute this resolver to then actually have the dependency resolved for the next resolver, right? Um, Most likely you're going to end up with a execution step, most likely, because you know ahead of time that you first have to execute this, then this, then this, then this, right?
mhm,
Whereas in graphical, in the normal graphical execution, it's breadth first, right? We just execute everything in parallel that we can. So there is no predetermined order how the fields execute. It could be
mhm.
that in one request it's field one, two, three, which is executed, but in the next request it's actually five, six, seven, and then one, two, three. Who knows? So that's a bit, you most likely have a plan. If you have links internally, it's probably going to be this because you analyze this only once, right?
Yeah, but we don't. This part of stuff doesn't get planned. The planning has to do with essentially we have to augment the client query with all these additional fragments that the resolvers need. And so
Hmm.
for us, query planning is, about adding all these fragments in. The way the dependencies work is basically we use promises, right? It's like, okay, uh, I'm going to read this thing. That's going to
Hmm.
get written by a different resolver. And when
It's
that resolver
just awaited.
finishes, we go. And so there's no there
It's a
there
chain.
is there is a dependency, right? And so there's an order induced on the resolvers, but it gets kind of realized at runtime, not plan time.
Mhm. Then I would just say probably all of your spans is probably just the field execution. Because the tracing here is not, you could enrich this, with, for example, the parent, or you could use links, for example, if you
Well,
want.
that's what we use. We use links to capture this. So, I mean, coming back to the spec, is that the kind of thing you'd want to put in the spec, or is it just, hey, it's interesting? Here, baby, does it this
So
way.
we just have one place where we also have to use links in the specification. I would say we could probably add something in the explanation here that you could have a backlink to the parent span so that you actually can build these graphs based on the tracing data. Um, the other place where we use it is for data loaders, right? Because data loaders have the same thing that you actually have many. I mean, there we have a different problem. So you have the thing that you have the same problem. You have multiple, every solver can have multiple parents, so to say, because you can say that you have a fragment which uses name A and name B, or field A and field B. Field A is a resolver, field B is a resolver, and now you suddenly have two parents. That's why you have to use links, right?
Right.
You cannot just use the parent ID. That wouldn't work. You have two parents. And that's exactly the problem that we also have with data loader, because the data loader essentially is a dependency which is in more than one resolver. And when you have an async resolver which uses data loader, you have more than one parent. And that's also where we use links.
Mm, okay.
So I think it's definitely something that we can discuss to put in. I would say it's probably gonna be, I mean, it's definitely gonna be an optional field,
Mhm.
or an optional thing to do, because it's a very viaduct, I guess, specific thing. I do see this though also in other servers. For example, I don't know about graphical Java with the Spring framework, but we have also the case where we can say this resolver depends on another resolver. Especially useful when you, for example, have things like you have a name and the first name. So you have a first name and last name. And now you want to have the display name of a user, which is essentially first name plus last name. Now, if you take a graph and you project this to the database, which is one of the features that you can enable in Hot Chocolate, then we have the problem that when you do not select the first name and you want to render the display name, then you don't have the data because it was never projected.
Mm,
So what we introduce is we actually create a dependency tree similar to you, less complicated. We just say that we want to, this resolver needs the first name and this resolver needs the last name. And then we also create these dependencies. So we know that these resolvers are actually, they never executed, but the execution knows that they exist. So we could technically backtrace them as well. So there's something there, I guess.
okay. Hey, if we back up, um, I was poking at the working group GitHub repo. There's not a lot of background information up there.
How
Um,
do you mean?
well, like the the README is very generic, right? Define best practices,
Ah,
semantic
yeah.
conventions, and there's participation guidelines. There's the actual spec, right? A bunch of YAML files. But like if I point Vicky to this and say, hey, you should participate, I'm putting myself in her shoes. Like, well, what do we do, right? And so is
Yeah,
there
so
a kind of a high level statement of goals here?
okay, so there isn't. So these work groups, we can add something to the main README. These work groups all more or less work the same. So to participate, you join a meeting like we are now having. And I agree that there should probably be a bit more written where the specification actually is and what the goal is. So the goal that we have here, just so that I can relate this to you, the goal that we have is to actually have a semantic conventions entry, because the one that we now have for GraphQL, you see, can't type, is a bit sad. Because when we look at this and we look at, oh, where is this? There is something about GraphQL in here. I know GraphQL. There we go. This is everything that they have. And one of the spans is very, very dangerous. So there's three attributes defined. Sorry, not spans. There's three attributes defined, and one attribute that is defined is the graphical document.
Mhm.
And you definitely don't want to send the graphical document on every request to your server. That's definitely not something that you want to do to your tracing system, right? Um, and we want to improve this. And for this, we have a lot of references where we can take, I don't know, Gen AI, because it's hyped, where they actually describe how these semantic conventions work for Gen AI. So they say we have a conversation ID, this could look like this, yada, 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 and this is essentially what we do. Now, eventually, there will be a pull request on the semantic conventions GitHub repository because they all live at the same place. And we will add this to here. Uh, Schemas? No. Model. Yes. Um, and that's essentially the same structure that we use here in our specification folder. And the specification folder essentially will then be taken and will be dumped into here in a pull request, and they will then eventually review it, and it will be merged as the new specification.
Mm.
So the goal is to make this for GraphQL. And we are actually already quite far into this with all of these spans. There's a lot of discussions. But I agree, it could be a bit more discoverable.
And to help, um, so from the perspective, so we have Viaduct as an open source project,
Mhm.
right? And I think it's a bit more obvious why conforming to a standard for telemetry would make sense. If we look at, Viaduct as it exists inside of Airbnb, it's quite mature in terms of its telemetry. And so, in terms of helping me sell this activity to folks inside the company, like how would this benefit Airbnb, beyond, being beneficial to Viaduct as an open source project, which, we care about.
So probably not, because this is more about setting a standard in how these telemetry systems work for the community to be able to switch between or to use telemetry systems like Datadog or Elastic or whatever. Because these telemetry systems, and I don't know what you use in Airbnb, but these telemetry systems usually are very bad at doing GraphQL because they are very optimized for the server spans, essentially, where you say we have slash and then we have many things that come after. So they're very optimized for the REST case, but just by nature, not because um, anything else. So when you, for example, take a graphical server, any of the graphical servers, and you plug it into either Elastic or something else, you always run into the same issue that you essentially just have slash GraphQL as the trace, and all your operations are listed under slash GraphQL. By following a standard, we enable these telemetry solutions, or by defining a standard, we enable these telemetry solutions to say, hey, we now support GraphQL, which that makes it possible that they can now inspect and actually use this knowledge and say, slash GraphQL is the root span, but inside of the root span, we have this activity, and this activity is actually what we want to present to the user. So
Mm.
that's what we try to do here to make this usable in the ecosystem. Now,
Mm.
I assume that from a point of Airbnb, you probably have already a way set up to do your telemetry, because as I said, you're quite mature in terms of telemetry. That means that the benefit of this to Airbnb is probably quite low. The
Mm.
benefit for the community to get your input into this, like how the experience that you made, then this is actually quite helpful. So from it helps the community. We have people usually in the calls from Shopify, which also has a public graphical API. They do also interesting things. For example, they trace all of their fields. We have people from Datadog, so from telemetry systems. We have people from the Guild. We did have a couple of people from Apollo, from the Federation side. So there's a lot of companies mixing their ideas and thoughts into the specification, just so that we
Mm.
have something great in the ecosystem.
Cool.
Yeah. So if you want to market it, it's just like working on something open source on the specification side, driving something in the GraphQL ecosystem. But direct benefit, I don't think um, you as a company will have of this.
Well, like I said, I think we obviously want Viaduct to become widely used. So from that perspective, if it conforms, to the spec, that helps with adoption. I will definitely kind of study what you have so far because it might be, hey, we didn't think of that, or hey, that's kind of nice. So we can definitely probably learn some stuff and ask some questions, and
I would,
share, uh, some of our experiences as well.
most likely you don't have the problem that a lot of people have that will use your library. You have different problems, right? You have problems of scale, you have more complicated problems. And often you forget about the simple case, like when you just have a graphical API, but you never heard of trusted documents and things like this. And then you have cardinality explosions and things like all of these things. So that's why specifications exist, right?
Right.
Yes. Um, so the pull request which I opened today will be one of the last that will go into this spec folder here. Then I will add a README file and will actually point to the pull request that will be in the semantic conventions repository.
Mhm.
This will happen this week. And this pull request will be linked in the A here in the spec and in the spec folder and B here. And then we
Mhm.
can work directly on the draft pull request in the semantic conventions repository just to make a bit of progress because otherwise we always have to work on this in this repository. So this is just the work group then. And I will
Okay.
link it at the top. Then Wiki can find it. And yeah, we can work on it on over there.
Okay. I'm taking notes. All right.
Great. Yeah, so row to V1 will be we open the pull request this week and then we just have to iterate on it. And hopefully we'll get it in before graphical conf. That would be really nice.
Do they move that fast? At the OTel stuff, folks?
Well, just because there's a specification, like you don't break anyone
Mm.
if you merge this. It's not like there's a graphical specification now suddenly people start adopting it, or you already have a graphical specification and now you start breaking people. It's something new. So I would say they probably move pretty fast.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just different groups. Some are pretty precious about this, and others are like, hey, great.
We
So
are we are very slow compared to them, I believe,
I
because they
see.
have a lot of different things to care about, you see.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so they're happy when we provide them how they should do it. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I think that was already it, unless you have a point that you want to discuss. And otherwise,
No.
I'm looking very much forward to having more people from Airbnb on the calls.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Good to catch up.
Fantastic. Same. And see you in the US, I guess.
Yeah.
At
And just a couple
Graphical
months.
Conf. Yeah,
Yep.
it is indeed. Time flies. All
All
right.
right.
See you
Bye for
later.
now.
Bye.